views and opinions expressed in this program are those of the participants and do not necessarily reflect the views of BronxNet or the program underwriters.
Well, it is Women's History Month, and coming up on this edition of Perspectives, we talk about Black women in the country and the community. Coming up, we talk and discuss front and center the achievements and continued struggles of Black women and women of color in corporate America. Plus, how do women of color actually navigate the race issue, as well as gender in the workplace, and especially when we talk about senior positions. That's coming up front and center on this edition of Perspectives with yours truly, Daren Jaime.
What's on your mind? Express what's on your mind. What's on your mind?
Anything relevant to life, you bring it to the table. Whether you make a move solo or a movement with a stable. No fables, you speak on your decisions. Cause in the long run, it's your voice, your views, your vision. Keeping it real with many messages for you to know. This ain't radio, but DJ runs the show. Entertainment, he rocks it. Politics, he locks it. The host with the most would handle any topic. Don't forget to share your perspective with shines of light. Cause it might make a difference in someone else's life.
Make a difference in someone's life. Express what's in your heart and your mind. Share your perspective.
What's your perspective? Let them know.
And welcome to Perspectives. I am Daren Jaime. And of course, we invite you to stay connected to us every week here on the show, right here on BronxNet's Channel 67. Well, what do? We provide various perspectives about various things, current events, news, things that actually pertain to the African-American community and beyond, but with a special emphasis on the African-American community. And we invite you to stay connected via our social media platforms. You can do that at BronxNet TV. My personal social media platform is Daren C. Jaime if you're looking for me on Facebook. And then on Twitter and Instagram, you can hit us at DC Jaime23. And then also for us as a station, our station's public information, BronxNet TV. We are going front and center, as we said at the top of the show. It is Women's History Month, and the month-long celebration of women's accomplishments and contributions is recognized all throughout the month of March. And as we celebrate, we recognize that there's still a long way to go, more particularly for Black women, to achieve full equity and equality in many areas of society. When we think about equal pay, when we think about equal opportunity in the workplace, those are just a couple of things that come to mind when we talk about women's empowerment, Women's History Month. But on the heels of International Women's Day, we are pleased to be joined on this episode by a very special guest. She's traveled the world exploring ways to which underrepresented populations, specifically people of African descent, can improve their lives and communities. She's also spent years in the intersections of race in America and has worked to develop diversity, equity, and inclusion training for companies as well as organizations. Dr.Juhanna Rogers, we welcome you back to the show. And again, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me. It's always a pleasure to come back to Perspectives and offer some new insight on what we have going on. So much happening.
It is so much happening. It is. We talk about where we are today. Of course, Women's History Month, it's the month of March. And sometimes, we downplay this month, but it's very important because we have seen women make a significant contribution to America, the fabric of America, and see this highlight for a month. But talk to me from your perspective. How do you feel when you hear Women's History Month?
It's always, particularly this Women's History Month, I'm so inspired and I think motivated to do some things differently. I don't know if it has meant as much or I thought about it as profoundly in years past as I do in this present time in 2020. And I think that has a lot to do with being in a position where I'm still kind of understanding and finding my path. But I think 2020, right, called many of us to really evaluate and think about the causes that are important to us, made us think about what social justice issues we wanted to really be committed to and what our positions would be within the struggle to achieve that, right? And so even with all of my background and my training, I think it's coming into this month this year and thinking about the dynamic ways in which women have contributed to fighting against injustices, that is, right? That really just hit me. And maybe that has something to do with, Stacey Abrams, for sure, Vice President Kamala Harris, and us, I think in 2020, despite everything that was going on, showing that the power of women can really change, the trajectory of our communities as well as our country. I think it hit me this year and celebrating this month in such a different and deeper way.
Mm-hmm. What was it about a Kamala Harris? What was it about even an Amanda Gorman, right? What was it about a Stacey Abrams that really ignites the flame for you to say, hey, proud to be a woman?
You know what? I think they're comeback stories, right? The moments in which Stacey Abrams, when she ran for governor, I'll never forget it. I was flying from Syracuse and I had a layover in Atlanta, and I'm watching the television waiting for, the polls to close and the results to come in. And I remember stopping in Atlanta and being so excited because I was like, okay, I might hear the news while I'm there in the state. And for that to have turned out the way that it did, was kind of like, oh man, now what? Right? Because here's this dynamic woman who, through a lot of systemic barriers was denied the opportunity to lead. So how do you come back from that, right? Like, what's your comeback story? And to sit and watch how the sister responded through organizing and doubling down on her commitment, just really sparked, I think, something in me to say, as a woman, sometimes we are doubted out. The system works against us in so many ways at the intersections of race and gender. And that's a lonely place at times. Let me just be, even from personal experience. And watching how she took that moment of probably hurt, loss, frustration, and so many other things, and turned it into an opportunity that really reshaped and claimed power in our country was just, I couldn't have imagined a more artistic way to stare injustices when it comes to being a Black woman or a woman in this country in a more profound, I think, and powerful way than that moment.
And talk to me about, how do you define, in this context right now of living in this climate, being a Black woman in America?
How would I define it at this moment? I would say at this moment, it's about claiming our space. The Shirley Chisholm quote often comes to mind, where if there's a room at the table, drag your chair. We are building our own tables. We are building our own legs, tabletop and all, and we're thinking about the tools. And more importantly, I don't think we're doing it in isolation. I think we're doing it in a collaborative way that brings other women with us, right? Like Stacey Abrams and Kamala. I'm quite sure, there was some coordination there. Stacey wasn't probably trying to go out and do it on her own. And I think even if we think about in our own local communities and how leadership is changing, I would imagine if there are some women leading at this point, they're doing it in collaborations with other women. And I think that is really, really important, because oftentimes the role that women play, specifically women of color, in the advancement or fight against justice historically, they aren't told. You hear Malcolm and Martin, and not to discredit or challenge any of the work that the men did, but we don't hear about the women in the churches that were cooking and organizing and supporting these individuals as much, right? Their stories are kind of in the background. And so how do we bring these women's stories to the foreground? And I think women are coming together, building their own tables to make sure that their names, their contributions are recognized and not forgotten.
Yeah. Taking a quick break. We're going to come back and talk more with you. But when we come back after the break, I want to talk about the issue of gender equity and gender equality. Talk about that when we return here on Perspectives with Dr. Juhanna Rogers.
New Yorkers have mastered existing in crowded places and walking fast. Now is the time to master social distancing. Social distancing means creating more personal space between yourself and others, at least 6 feet. Creating more physical distance protects yourself and other New Yorkers from the spread of coronavirus. To do your part, stay home. Stay connected through calls, texts, and video chats. If you have to go out for essentials like food and medicine, avoid crowds and put space between yourself and other people standing in line. If you go outside, just remember to keep 6 feet of space between yourself and others. This is not just about you. It's also about protecting the most vulnerable and preserving the health of essential workers who are on the front lines. If you're feeling overwhelmed, connect with counselors at NYC Well. Text COVID to 692-692 for real-time updates or visit nyc.gov/coronavirus.
We built a media network for you.
BronxNet TV.
Come learn in your new state-of-the-art studios at Lehman College.
At Mercy College.
And coming soon to the South Bronx in the Hub.
Inspire with your stories, culture, history.
Your Bronx on BronxNet.
Engage with us.
Connect with us at your channels and at bronxnet.tv.
Learn, engage, inspire. BronxNet TV.
From the Bronx
to the world.
BronxNet.
And we're back here on Perspectives. Daren Jaime here with you. We are continuing our conversation with Dr.Juhanna Rogers as we celebrate Women's History Month, taking a look at the accomplishments and still the work that yet needs to be done for women. And as we turn now our attention to women in the workplace, Dr. Juhanna, you are in the corporate sector, very influential in the corporate sector. And of course, working around a group of men. Of course, she goes on to say about gender equity, right? There's two different topics. There's gender equality and there's gender equity. And to talk to women, they say when it comes to corporate America, still woefully deficient in the area of gender equality.
Yeah. And I don't think we've had this conversation as intensely as it's being had at this moment. Actually, in my workplace, we're hosting a panel on it on the 16th of March and bringing women together to talk about what we even say the workplace, what that means, right? And so if you're an entrepreneur and competing against other probably predominantly male entrepreneurs in your industry or sector, right? It's part of the workplace challenge. If you're working within the corporate environment, access to mentorship, promotion, and leadership opportunities, right? Pay equity is still a huge barrier for folks, and what has been for a very long time. These aren't new issues. If you're a sister, a woman of color, the conversation over the last 2 years and the Supreme Court decision about discrimination about hair and locks and whether those are acceptable in the corporate workspace. I mean, these conversations that are so I would say juvenile in so many ways when we think about it, because what do they have to do with really what a person brings to the work? But yet still we're having these conversations or need to. And I think over last year with what we are experiencing as a country, the impact that it has had disproportionately on women of color specifically, working in oftentimes on those front lines, many being represented in hourly wage jobs that were not conducive to pivoting to working remotely. And so the exposure to women, and even for those that are in a position, maybe a corporate position that are working remotely now, the stress levels of having to manage their homes, being caregivers and the responsibilities associated with that. How do you talk about that in a space that is predominantly male, right? And some of those norms, gender norms, where associating probably with historical ideas or conservative ideas on what women do. But I think the reality is that there are a lot of women that are trying to manage and balance in ways that haven't been talked about in the workplace. And many of them have stepped away because of it. And so we have women falling out of the workplace in record numbers that we haven't seen before. Even so much so President Biden calling it, a national emergency. Like, how do we pay attention to what's happening there? And how do we better support and create infrastructures around it?
Yeah. I want to ask about the conversation, right? Because when we talk about these conversations in the workplace, we talk about women's equality, women's equity. I'll use African Americans as a backdrop. Sometimes we have the conversation about race, right? Just token conversations. To just token conversations to say we've had the conversation, we've talked about it, and then consequently not see little or no action and or result or minimal tokenism, if you will, to say that we've done what we needed to do.
Right.
What are you finding in the area when it comes to women? Are you finding that these are token conversations, or are they being embraced to a place where now we're seeing some real critical results?
You know what? I think with the conversation that's happening right now, the impact of losing more women in the workplace is going to be one that drastically impacts productivity levels, drastically impact the way that businesses have been operationalized, because many of them are at the intersections of representation and operations, thinking about how we're doing what we're doing, oftentimes when we look at these organizations. And so when we're having the conversations right now, I think folks are concerned. I don't know if they necessarily know what to do and are looking for answers. I think the reality will be that we're going to have to come up with new strategies, new initiatives that we just haven't tried before. Before, so much of the conversation about women in the workplace was around maternal benefits and childbirth, right? And thinking about, the time that one is allowed or permitted to receive a salary and be at home with their child, right? That was mainly when we talked about it, what was up as of late. When we think about the intersections of race and gender, right, oftentimes the Black woman in workspaces is seen as this mythical, all-encompassing, heroic, never needing a break kind of work mule 2.0 kind of character. And I think now we are realizing the impact of our work. We're asking for more. We're demanding support. We are not going to do it all, right? And so are you providing us the infrastructure, compensating us with the salaries that are reflective of our impact? And I think that demand is going to be put on the table, I think, in ways, and is being put on the table in ways that companies can no longer ignore, especially with the last year.
When you're working in organizations, how have they been with you when it comes to the issue of compensation, right? Is it something that you have to still negotiate because you're a woman? Or have organizations been just because, hey, listen, we're gonna do right by you?
I personally have been mentored to ask and negotiate, to always ask for more. I think what I find amongst my peers is that how to structure those conversations and the confidence factor to do it sometimes requires more mentorship or more engagement and a collaboration with women to say, I did this or I did that. I think now, because we're virtually, there are more spaces being carved out to have that conversation, and people are showing up and asking. So no, I always ask, negotiate, because normally what they offer you, they could probably do at least 10,000 more. Let's just say, for example.
Facts. Facts. All right. Let me take a quick break. Be back with Dr.Juhanna Rogers. We'll be right back right here on Perspectives. Back here with Dr. Juhanna Rogers, we are talking about Women's History Month and the contributions of women all throughout America and all throughout society. Dr. Juhanna, let me go front and center with you for a moment, talk about you, and give me a little bit about now as a seasoned woman. Tell me a little bit about your work and your mission, and what do you feel that your mission is as a woman in this generation?
Great question. So, in August, and speaking on the last segment of this episode, we talked about asking for what we want. I really had to walk in to my own path and really ask for what it is that I felt I could do and what I could contribute to our organization. And so my president and former supervisor sat down and said, you know, Johanna, what is it that you really see yourself doing? And I unapologetically said, I want to look at issues of racial equity and social impact, right, with the business community. And my president, Rob Simpson, said, tell me a little bit more of what that would look like, right? And I designed my current role. So on August 1st, I was named Vice President for Racial Equity and Social Impact at Center State CEO. And that was a very scary, challenging experience for me. I had to strip myself of that imposter syndrome that I think many women, when you're in a predominantly male space, particularly women of color, you're thinking about so many dynamics that are happening and how you relate to them and who your colleagues are. And I kind of had this moment where I said, who are you? What are you qualified to do? And what value can you bring to this organization? And I am going to ask for the role that I think would help us serve in a space that needed to be served in, and really think about my own leadership. And so here I am now, vice president of this body of work, this portfolio that is going into companies, not just in Central New York, but in other areas as well, and doing equity training, talking about issues of race, gender, race and gender, the intersections of that, and other topics related to social justice, and helping businesses think about what it is they want to do, not just issuing statements, but thinking about tactical strategies and intentional actions that they're going to take that would help recruit, retain, and engage more diverse talent, not just in lower levels positions, but from entry level positions to the C-suite, right? I released a website called CenterStateCEOEquity.com. We're challenging businesses in our region to take the equity pledge and focus on really thinking about ways to do this work that's associated with diversifying staff, thinking about women and equity there, partnering with MWBE's minority and women-owned business enterprises to for products and services, and working with community partners to better support the local community and diverse talent that's within it. And I'm holding people to task. And my organization, it was a bold step for them to take, but they said, you know, we need to do this. And so I'm waking up every day thinking about business and what it can look like for the future, and how the diverse faces of tomorrow will hopefully enter a workspace that's a little bit more inclusive, focused on belonging, and supportive of the racialized experience in America.
I want to get your, share with us a little bit, because I know that you have a thing before we go about Behind the Woman, and you got a TV show called Behind the Woman. So let people know about that and where they can find out about Behind the Woman.
Yes. So in addition to doing this work professionally for my 9 to 5, I'm also a scholar and artist. And so I think about how to really live and breathe my mission. And so I'm talking with women about their stories similar to mine, and maybe they're in a leadership role, an entrepreneur, a political figure living in the Central New York region, and tell us how you got there. And so Behind the Woman is a show dedicated to that. It started as a web series, and now you can find it on the regional PBS station, WCNY, and season 2 will be starting off this summer.
Excellent. So you excited about it?
I'm super excited about it. The way in which it's helping more folks connect with the community and think about the diversity in New York, but also the diversity in Central New York specifically a little bit differently. So I'm excited about the project for sure.
Well, you're doing the work. Dr. Juhanna Rogers, we are out of time, but thank you so much for joining us here on Perspectives.
Thank you for having me.
All righty. Well, good to have Dr. Juhanna Rogers here with us on Perspectives. We thank you for joining us. And listen, you can watch Perspectives every week here on BronxNet Channel 67. Of course, if you want to be able to catch us on the web, bronxnet.org. But until next time we meet, listen, stay safe, everybody. I'm Daren Jaime. Make sure you share a perspective with somebody else you just don't know. It might make a difference in somebody else's life. Take care.
Entertainment, he rocks it. Politics, he locks it. The host with the most would handle any topic. Don't forget to share your perspective with shines of light, because it might make a difference in someone else's life.
Make a difference in someone's life. Express what's in your heart.